Good morning, colleagues. Thank you all for being with us this morning to support the launch of the Safeguarding Adults Who Go Missing. It's a multi-agency practice framework for Bexley, Greenwich and Lewisham. And the session today is designed exactly to do that, is to summarise the practice framework that we published in December of 2025. And this session will go through the elements of what's within the practice framework and help more generally to give a good summary of the key issues linked to missing adults, and therefore act as a good resource for numerous agencies that no doubt will come into contact with adults who go missing, or it's something that's part of their daily work. Just wanted to, before we get started, acknowledge a few key people. So colleagues from Bexley, which had an existing framework that this multi-borough, multi-agency framework is based upon. So thanks to Anita Reader in Bexley, who's my counterpart. I don't think I've introduced myself, so that's an error. I'll tell you who I am. My name is Martin Crow. I'm the business manager from the Lewisham Safeguarding Adults Board. So yeah, thanks to my colleague Anita Reader in Bexley, who's helped to develop the practice framework, and equally my colleague Helen Bonnywell, who's also my counterpart in the Borough of Greenwich. And also just to give a shout out to PC Bernie Gay in Met Police, who's had a strong hand as well in helping us to develop this framework. And again, numerous other professionals and agencies along the way. We've been working on this for quite some time. So thanks to lots of agencies and individuals, but those key people in particular that have helped as we've developed the practice framework over the last year or two. As I've said, I'm going to talk throughout the session this morning about the multi-agency practice framework we've created and the reason for that, the reason we've created it in the first instance. So I'll make that clear as we go through the introduction. But the first thing I really want to ask colleagues to do is to give me your views on what are the key issues in relation to missing adults. So I'm going to launch a short poll, which just basically asks that question. So if you can contribute to the poll, if you can summarize just by using one word or maybe just two words, that'll be helpful. And that just helps the word cloud to develop, obviously. And we can see some of the most commonly used words or key phrases. So yeah, just one word or a couple of words, short phrase, if you can, please. And that will help to give me an idea of what you're thinking about this morning and help to introduce the session itself. Okay, that's brilliant. Thank you. So as you can see with the word cloud, mental health is the one that stands out in the center. That's been most commonly used. 6 people have said that. But what's interesting is outside of that, actually, there's lots of other comments people have made, which again, I think helps to signpost to the fact that it is a complex issue, obviously, and it has a lot of different dynamics to it. So some of the comments being made, we've got dementia, health risks, learning disability, domestic violence, addiction, police capacity, collaboration, immigration status, missed opportunities, care and support, accountability. So yeah, it's great to see that. And it really helps to visually summarize some of the key things that we will speak about this morning. and to visually help us to see that how complex and how wide an issue it actually is, how many different dynamics there are that link to the subject of missing adults. So that's a great introduction and start to the session. Thank you. Okay, in terms of the overview then, you can see there we've got some key facts in this slide. So over 400 adults are reported missing in the UK every day. And in terms of the London area, the most recent available data we have from Metropolitan Police, there was over 12,000 missing adults in a year. And we do know that South East London has one of the highest rates of missing adults across the capital. We know that 80% of missing adults will be experiencing diagnosed or undiagnosed mental health issues. So that links back to your introduction, word cloud. So mental ill health is a very significant issue linked to missing adults. We know that 3/4 of adults who have been missing experience harm whilst they are missing. 40% of returned missing adults disclose trying to take their own life, unfortunately, during that missing episode. And 60% disclosed experiencing some form of harm, including being threatened, sexually assaulted, experiencing physical violence. And again, sadly, we do know that some people take their own lives whilst they are missing. And linked to that, homelessness is a key factor. Dementia was mentioned in your word cloud. And again, 40% of people living with dementia will go missing at some point in their lives. And some research actually suggests it's even higher than that. Some agencies suggest it might be as high as 70%. But what we do know is 1 in 10 of all current missing adult cases involves dementia, and over 40,000 people in the UK living with dementia are reported missing for the first time every year. And the overall number is much likely to be higher than that because obviously not everyone who is missing actually is reported to the police or a statutory agency. And we know that the causes of missing adults are linked to distress and trauma, coercion, unmet need. And every case is different. And every case involves obviously a human story, a human experience. And in many instances, it's linked to fear, isolation, and the silent hope that someone cares enough to notice. And that is something that we see being reported through the lived experience and the voice of the person who has experienced being missing. The practice framework we have is broken down into 4 key areas: planning and prevention, the missing episode itself, the safeguarding response, and post-incident evaluation. So broadly, the session this morning will mirror those 4 sections, and we've got 3 segments. And what we're going to do is pause at the end of each for comments and questions, and the session will help to summarize the wider practice framework, which you can see I've signposted here. So this is on the safeguarding, the Lewisham Safeguarding Adults Board's website. It's located we've got a dedicated web page for missing adults. So we've got it posted there, as well as other things, other resources, and this video from today will be there as well once we've got it posted. And no doubt colleagues in Bexley and Greenwich, similarly, you'll have locations, websites, etc., that you will place the video from today, the practice framework, and no doubt other resources besides. So I'll just signpost that there for you so you can find it there on that web page as a minimum. And just to make the connection really to adult safeguarding, so I've already mentioned PC Bernie Gay already, and I remember speaking to Bernie quite a while ago now, and I asked her, out of the missing adult cases that she was involved with and she was dealing with, how many of them involved care and support needs? And I remember Bernie pausing for a few seconds, thinking about it, and then just said to me, all of them. So that's the link to adult safeguarding, that actually from Bernie's experience, all of the adults who have been missing across Southeast London will have care and support needs. So that's something that we need to think about from a statutory adult safeguarding perspective. Okay, then, so the planning and prevention element of the practice framework, the foundation for safeguarding adults who go missing is based on balancing our legal duties with taking a trauma-informed approach to prevention, recognizing veteran safeguarding needs, and embedding the principle of adult autonomy, including actually the legal right not to be found. And we'll find those legal duties and principles in that framework. So we'll find guidance in the Care Act 2014, we'll find it in the Human Rights Act 1998, which links to Guardianship and Missing Persons Act 2017, which has got Claudia's Law built within that, which allow us to think about long-term missing cases and how we might manage those instances. The Data Protection Act 2018 and UK GDPR will also guide us in that respect. And we've got the Armed Forces Covenant duty and the statutory guidance there as well. And I'll make clear as we go through the session this morning, why is it we are focusing in on veteran safeguarding needs and why that's particularly relevant in Southeast London. In terms of national frameworks, there's actually no statutory guidance for the subject of missing adults or primary legislation, London-wide guidance. We don't have any of those things for adults. We do for children. So we've got primary legislation, we've got statutory guidance, we've got London-wide procedures. So all of those things exist for children, but none of those things exist for adults. So the closest we've got is the Missing Children and Adult Strategy, which is quite dated now, 2011. So they are just a high-level set of priorities. And we've got a multi-agency response for adults missing from health and care settings, which helps to guide us. That's a national framework, but obviously only relevant in those contexts in health and care settings. So actually, that was one of the underpinning reasons to create the multi-agency practice framework we now have in Southeast London, because there was an absence of those things across London and nationally. So as far as I'm aware, we're the first area in London to have something like this, and I'm not aware of anywhere else in England either. That might be the case, but it's not something that I'm aware of. So that's, again, as I've said, the underpinning reason to create the practice framework for us to use across our 3 boroughs. So it helps to strengthen our approach and give us a more consistent and professional and coherent response to missing adult cases, and in particular multi-agency. It's not just for the police to manage missing adult cases. Every agency can be involved, and certainly the statutory and public sector agencies are key organisations that should be involved. Okay, definition of missing. Again, because there's an absence of primary legislation, statutory guidance, we don't really have a national definition. So the Metropolitan Police's definition is based on national police guidance. So we recommend now through the practice framework that we all across Southeast London, Bexley, Greenwich and Lewisham, we all now utilise this definition. Anyone whose whereabouts cannot be established will be considered as missing until located and their well-being or otherwise confirmed. This means that if a person is expected to be at home and they're not, and they've not arrived at home or somewhere else that they're supposed to be, they can be reported missing. It doesn't mean that they have to be or must be, but they can be reported as missing. The person is considered missing if their whereabouts are not known and the circumstances are out of character. This includes if you think they may be a victim of crime or may be at risk of harming themselves or someone else. Services and agencies may use different definitions of what missing entails and when exactly an adult should be classed as missing and at what timescale. So again, you might determine that based on the context of your agency, your service, how you interact with your clients. That will be unique to your team, your agency, the people that you work with. However, if we all use the Met Police's definition, that will help to underpin our approach. If we decide then to ignore or just entirely go down our own route, what can happen is it can lead to confusion. It can potentially leave the adult even more exposed to risk before this is eventually reported to police. So if we bear in mind the police's definition, think about your unique context, but always remember that we can report people missing to Met Police using the definition that they have created. And what we should always do is think about the necessity for police involvement. So we need to think about the definition, think about the necessity. And if we think about the time scale, you might decide to report a missing person within minutes. It might be much longer. But once you've decided that the necessity is there, then you should not delay making a missing report to police. A necessity will be determined on the initial outcome of the attempts you've made to locate the person, to speak to the person, to assess the risks, establish the overall need, think about the immediacy and the concerns and the safety of the person or other individuals. Bear all of those things in mind before you then decide there is a necessity. But again, as I've said, you might make that decision very, very quickly in a matter of minutes, or it may take a bit longer, potentially even hours, to come to that conclusion. But nonetheless, once the necessity has been determined, the guidance tells us that we should report to police, use their definition, but obviously think about the context of your clients, your service users, your agency, your team, your organization. We also need to bear in mind the right to be missing. If a person is over 18 years old, they are not breaking the law by going missing. However, the police will want to make sure that if someone is reported missing to them, they will want to make sure that that individual is safe, and they can only do that if they can meet with that person. But once they've done that, once they've met the person, they can close their investigation and they cannot force anyone to return to their home place of residence unless there's a legal reason to do so. For example, under the Mental Health Act or the Mental Capacity Act. So otherwise, if they deem that the person is safe, they decide they don't want to return home, the police might not be able to make that happen. So that's something that we've got to bear in mind, the individual adult's right to be missing. If the adult is assessed to have the mental capacity to make that decision, their legal right to go missing, and if they're not at imminent risk, their decision to disengage, leave, or not return must be respected. And that's enshrined within their legal right not to be found. And that goes back to the legal framework I mentioned earlier. So think about mental capacity, how that might be assessed, how that might be documented, and remain open to further engagement. That decision might change, the risks might change, the person's capacity might change. We know that mental capacity, for example, with adults living with a cognitive illness may decline over time. We know that adults who are involved with substance use, their capacity may fluctuate on an hourly, daily basis, weekly basis. So capacity can fluctuate and change over time. So that's something that we need to consider. So choices and decisions that are being made today might not be the same tomorrow. But nonetheless, the legal framework supports that right for someone to be missing. It's not an offence to go missing. Okay, so why do adults actually go missing? We know there are numerous reasons why that happens. So I'm going to pause there and bring you in and take a few comments from the audience. So we'll use the raised hand function. So in your experience then, what are the key reasons adults go missing? Charlie?
Yeah, so I'm a rough sleeping coordinator at Greenwich Council, and one of the key reasons why people go missing for us is because they've potentially had a CPN or something placed against them that means they can't access this particular part of the borough or something like that. So then they feel pushed out of the area they were once familiar with, so they tend to move on.
Okay, just tell us, Charlie, CPN, what does that actually?
Community protection notice, or they can be community protection orders. There's different levels of. I'm not actually that hot on what they all are, but they stop people from being able to either sleep in a particular area, beg in a particular area, enter a particular area. So they can often place challenges for us.
So the link between homelessness and the criminal justice system and people feeling pushed out, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Brilliant, thank you. Bernie, welcome. I've already name checked you at the start. It's great to see you this morning. Put your mic on, Bernie, and yeah, tell us from your very detailed level of experience, why do adults go missing?
Dementia. We see a lot of dementia as well. So capacity, a lack of capacity, or becoming confused when they're out in the community.
Yeah, brilliant, thank you. And we'll take one final point from Mike.
Thanks. I was thinking of death and divorce.
Yeah, so some level of trauma or bereavement, a crossroads in someone's life, a traumatic experience that leads to a deterioration in their circumstances, and then people go missing. Thanks, Mike. Yeah, so again on the screen, I'm just going to help to summarize that and highlight some of the key things. Obviously not an exhaustive list, but yeah, mental health and emotional distress from the national research we have is the number one reason that people go missing. 80% of cases are linked to mental ill health and emotional distress. Homelessness, housing instability, that was referenced in the verbal comments we've just had. Financial stress and debt, and the crossovers between the things that we've already mentioned there. So there will be a crossover between financial stress, mental ill health, emotional distress, housing instability, relationship breakdown and family conflict, dementia and cognitive impairment, which Bernie mentioned, exploitation and abuse. So people go missing to either escape from that, or because they haven't chosen actually to go missing, they are taken, they are trafficked, they are moved around. We see that reported there. We have cases of human trafficking, people go missing because they've been removed, they've been taken. So that links to the world of modern slavery. Substance use, I've already touched on a little bit. Cultural pressures. And yeah, if we can understand the reasons, we can work to prevent these risks developing. I think within the context of relationship breakdown, family conflict, we need to mention as well domestic abuse. It is a key issue, and domestic abuse may cut across into cultural pressures as well, if we think about forced marriage, honour-based violence. So we shouldn't underestimate, actually, domestic abuse is a significant driver for the reasons adults go missing as well. So yeah, it's a summary. In the practice framework, this subject is addressed in a lot more detail, the reasons why people go missing. So please take a look at that and work through and think about your own clients and service users and the reasons they go missing. And crucially, from a prevention perspective, again, what we can do to mitigate those risks and help to prevent adults going missing in the first place. Another key reason that people go missing is because of physical design, the environment that they might live in. So if we think about care homes, for example, supported living environments, if they're not designed in the best way possible, that can lead to people feeling that they are confused, that they become lost, and it adds to the potential for people to go missing. So confusing signage, inaccessible exit controls, unsupervised doorways, lack of personalization, environments not adapted in terms of cognitive illness or dementia or trauma. So the sense that people just don't feel safe in this environment, they need to leave, or they shouldn't leave, but are able to leave, can all contribute to the reasons why people go missing. In this photograph here, this home could be anyone's. So this is a generic photograph of a care home. And as the caption states, which means it's no one's, it's not personalized. People don't feel it's their home, so they just leave because they don't feel connected to it. So we all, I think, need to think about physical environment design and what that communicates to clients and service users. I've been in lots of care homes over the last decade involved in my work. Many of them are good, and one or two I've been to are superb with this in mind. Most are pretty good, one or two excellent, but some actually are not good at all. They are very generic and bland and not homely, and can, in my opinion, add to all of those things that I've just mentioned. So we've got to think about physical environment design. And this brings us back to this subject, the balance between autonomy and protection, the person's right to self-determination, the freedom to make their own decisions about their own life, their choices, their beliefs, and perhaps our duty to prevent abuse, neglect, and exploitation, ensuring the individual is safe. How do we balance those two things? So that links back to environment design, it links back to the right of the adult and their right to be missing as an adult. And how do we balance those two things? So it's a key consideration that we need to constantly be thinking about, certainly from an adult safeguarding perspective, and we can bring it to the table when we think about missing adults as well. And just two quotes, this one, a very famous one that helps to reinforce those comments really. What good is it making someone safer if it merely makes them miserable? That was Justice Mumby, 2007, often quoted in the world of adult safeguarding. And this one, I've heard this being said numerous times over the years. I would rather be in the court of protection answering questions on why I chose to share information and help keep someone safe than in the coroner's court answering questions on why I didn't. So it's a balance. So when we think about missing adults, it's that balance that we all have to think about in terms of autonomy and protection, and how we more generally apply that in our practice, in our ways of working. So just think about that as well. And crucially, how we work with our clients, how we work with the adult, how we keep them at the center of everything that we think, say, and do, involve them in how we plan, how we design, how we help to prevent risk, involve them in everything that you do from a missing adult's perspective. And again, just to finalize and summarize what I was saying there around dementia-friendly design and that environment, think about controlled access points, think about clear wayfinding signage, think about safe outdoor spaces, think about exits and how they are managed and how they are signposted. Think about window restrictors and how we can help to keep people safe. We've had a very high profile example of that in Lewisham. Someone getting out of a window, unfortunately, fell to their death in a care environment. Quiet zones, memory boxes and landmarks, things that we can do to help people feel more at home, and color-coded corridors helps to support navigation. And the quote at the bottom there, I didn't mean to leave. I just couldn't find my room and thought I was lost. So that's an adult man with dementia in Lewisham. So just think about those things. And that brings us to the end of the first segment. So I'm going to pause there for any comments, anything that you think I might have missed to fill in the gaps, or any key issues that you want to highlight in that first segment. Stunned you all into silence. Paula, thank you for joining. Go for it, yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. Well, in the first segment, you were mentioning as well that adults, they do have the right to be missing. But then how do we evidence? Will there be maybe like a document or a template or a checklist to evidence and record the decision of the adult once they are found? How do we record the decision of them, or that they do have the capacity to decide, you know what, they just don't want to be found? So yeah, what's the expectation in that sense?
Well, yeah, I suppose if an adult's reported missing, the police get involved in that investigation. And if they find the adult, then one of the key considerations will be to assess their capacity to make that relevant decision, that choice to go missing. Do they still have the mental capacity to make that choice and decision? So yes, certainly feedback from police colleagues is that they will take that, as a significant issue. They will consider that assessment. What we do know, obviously, is mental capacity is complex. Often it's a multi-agency issue, isn't it? It's not just for one professional to make that determination. So I'll bring Bernie in a second. But in terms of the more complex decisions, they might need colleagues from social care and health to support them in making assessments of mental capacity. So does the adult have that, that capacity to make that choice to be missing? So I'll bring Bernie in, and no doubt Bernie will elaborate on that point.
Thank you, Martin. I don't know if you covered the grab packs yet and the information sharing, but for us, the key points would be having all of the information about that person on the information sharing document, medication, medical conditions, what would happen given if they were missing for X amount of time, what happens, when are they next due their medication, when did they last have their last dose, what's the implications of them not receiving that medication. So the more information you can share with us will help us with our police response. It helps us to make an informed risk assessment. And then obviously we will work with the professional network to try and locate them. And then when we do, it's all about how presentation at that time with that person. But obviously we'd like to factor in some kind of pre-planned how do we respond as a professional network when they are located? What do we do if we're presented with this situation, or just who do we reach out to? What pathway should we be considering when they're found? And then obviously that professional discussion to review that episode, to review any concerns that have come out of it, any safeguarding concerns, or and just planning again in the event that it happens again.
Thank you, Bernie. Hopefully that answers the question, Paula. But yeah, basically an assessment of capacity. Does the adult have the mental capacity to make that choice, that decision, either at the time they went missing or certainly when they're being found on an ongoing basis? And as I've said, often it's complex. It might be multi-agency. You will need support to make those assessments of capacity. So again, in the practice framework, certainly that subject is signposted and dealt with in more detail. And certainly I think, as Bernie's just described, the police will lead on that, but it will certainly be a multi-agency response. Okay, we're going to move on then to the second segment, and we'll now start to think about risk assessment and safety planning. So the first thing is that safety planning should be supported through trauma-informed practice and by conducting thorough assessments, again aligned with the legal framework we mentioned earlier. We'll talk in a while a little bit about professional curiosity, the adult's autonomy, which we've referenced. And also you need to think about, if you are developing a safety plan, who might need to know about that? Who are you going to share that with? So practitioners should document the risk of missing based on known health or safeguarding history. So that could be trauma, coercion, diagnosis of health conditions or mental health conditions, the episode context. So in the past, has that happened very suddenly? What's been the timing, the location, repeated patterns, etc.? So that background context. Capacity, which we mentioned, mental capacity, is the adult making an autonomous and capacitated choice and decision. The likelihood of harm, the environment that they've been in or they might be perceived to be going to, any unmet need, the risk of exploitation. Thinking about the physical design again, which I've spoken about, where they were living before, did that add or may that add to the risks that they face? And think about the adult themselves. What have they said about this? What have they told you in the past in terms of missing episodes? What are the signals? What have they said about risk or the factors in their life that may trigger them to think about being missing? So think about the voice and the agency of the adult, and think about veteran issues. So adults who've served in the armed forces, their service history, the indicators that they might have, and all of those things will be interlinked, and that might come back to mental ill health, etc. And think about any other referrals that you've already made in the past. Who's been involved? The local authority, health, police, etc. Who else has already been involved in this adult's life? What referrals have you made before? What information can you draw out to help you with your risk assessment? And again, at the bottom of that, I've just added in a few hyperlinks to key issues. So if we think about the Herbert protocol, which I'm going to show you a video on in a second, and think about hidden disabilities. So again, just some links to other factors to think about. And as we mentioned already, cognitive illness is a key underpinning reason for people to be missing. So we need to think about that in terms of our risk assessment and safety planning. So I'm going to show you a short film now on the Herbert protocol, which we've created locally for South London based on support with our colleagues elsewhere in the country. So I'll stop sharing my slides now and go to the video. And the video I'm going to show you is actually based on the dedicated webpage we've created in Lewisham, which is packed full of some great resources. So if you go to that webpage, you'll see them on there as well. So here we go. The video just lasts about 3 minutes.
Once upon a time, there was an old man called Herbert who lived in a care home in Norfolk. A survivor of the Normandy landings, he liked to have choice and control about what he did. And he loved to walk around the town. And like many others who go missing, he walked with purpose. So if you asked him, he knew exactly where he was going. To the pub, he'd say, or just out for a walk. Problem was that once he got there, he'd forget why he came, how to get home, and sometimes who he was. Once he forgot how to withdraw money from his bank account and tried to hold up the joint with a walking stick. Despite this failed robbery, everyone in town and the care home loved him and didn't want to see him cooped up. So they gathered together to create a Herbert cheat sheet and sent it to the places he liked to go most. It had his name, some background information, some relevant phone numbers. just enough to get him back home with the minimum amount of fuss. The Herbert Protocol was so successful that it's now being used by families, loved ones, concerned neighbours, police, home carers and care homes all over the UK, helping thousands of people with dementia, brain injuries, learning disabilities or mental health issues, who walk with purpose like Herbert, not to walk into danger, and to see them home safely. For the latest advice from local police or more information about the Herbert Protocol, wearable tracking devices or any other solutions for people who walk away from home, you can use the QR codes or links on screen to find out more.
Okay, so that's the Herbert Protocol. And just to add to that, there's a similar scheme actually that's developing across the country called the Forcer Protocol. So that is going to be implemented across the Metropolitan Police area in the near future. So it's a similar scheme. So I'll bring Bernie in. Do you want to mention a bit more about that, Bernie?
Yes, we do actually have that in place, Martin, sorry. So the Herbert Protocol was initially a paper document that we shared with partners, but we've now running it in conjunction with Medical Alert. So Medical Alert have agreed that carers or family members can open an online account. There's no charge, it's free of charge. And on there you can complete an online Herbert Protocol form. So in cases where you have family members that don't live close to that person, they can still have control over that document and keep it up to date. So what happens is when that person's reported missing, if you notify the police operator that they have a Herbert Protocol form with Medical Alert, we are able to access that 24/7. And then a copy of it, along with an image of the person, is shared with us through a secure email system. And that helps us within that, what we call a golden hour, to try and locate them as quickly as we can. So you'll have things on there about places they used to live, workplaces, any sort of routines that they have on a weekly basis. And it just kind of, again, has that information around their health and medication to help us make that informed risk assessment and, try and deploy our officers to where we think we're likely to find them.
Okay.
So that is, and we can send out a link for that with some literature to you all as well.
That's in, we've got the link to Medical Alert. It's in the slide deck from today, and it's also in the practice framework. So as you've described, Bernie, anybody free of charge can use the service of Medical Alert have got on the Herbert Protocol. But what about the Forcer Protocol, which is particularly for veterans? Do you want to mention a little bit about that as well?
Yeah, that's still quite new, so it's still being discussed centrally, but we will have a similar protocol for veterans as well, and that will be it's called the Forcer Protocol. I think it's a national protocol that the Met haven't yet implemented, but it is coming. So similar concepts about having that information readily available.
Brilliant, thank you, Bernie. Okay, I'm going to go back to the slide deck. Okay, so we'll move on then, just to talk a little bit about professional curiosity. So if this is not a term that you've seen or heard of before, it basically means curiosity is required to support practitioners to question and challenge the information they receive, identify concerns, and make connections to enable a greater understanding of a person's situation. So what we do know from a safeguarding perspective, both for children and adults, it is one of the more significant things that we do see from a generic safeguarding perspective. And it's often a barrier to some of the risks that develop in a person's life from a professional's point of view, the fact that they've not been identified. So we can apply the same principles and the use of professional curiosity in terms of missing adults, because it's a way to actively explore a person's circumstances. It's a way for us to triangulate the information that we have. So if we use the right questions, we observe, we listen, we triangulate, we build a fuller picture of the person's risks, needs, lived experience, it will allow us obviously to have a greater understanding and therefore help to prevent those risks from escalating. So it's about respectfully challenging assumptions, noticing what is unsaid, and being alert to disguised compliance, coercion, or the accumulation of harm and exploitation, how things can build up. And what we now know over sort of several years worth of research is that we've got many barriers to professional curiosity, and it's the sense of why we lose the ability to ask the question why. So from a professional point of view, why is it we stop asking that question? And the evidence tells us there's numerous barriers to professional curiosity, but some of the key ones we've listed on screen. So the ones in red we're going to concentrate on, and just a quick exercise for you to do. So you can see here on the top right, we've got the answers to the questions basically jumbled up. So these blank boxes, one of those answers fits into the corresponding boxes. So I'm just going to give you 60 seconds to do that, a quick exercise for you to do for yourself, to fill in the missing blanks, work through them and do that in 60 seconds. You know what? I've changed my mind. Let's do it in 15 seconds. Let's do it as quickly as we possibly can in 15 seconds.
Hi, sorry, I'm unable to type in the box. Are we supposed to type in the box?
No, you can just write it down for yourself.
Oh,
and
okay, thank you.
just match the answers to the boxes.
Thank you.
And I'll give you 5 more seconds to finish that. And that's it, time's up. And there is a reason why I'm being so obviously silly with the time scales I've given you. And the reason is just to sort of reinforce that, again, through research, and there's a very, very detailed survey that was conducted in Oxfordshire last year, and they spoke to 1,000 professionals, and those 1,000 professionals said the single biggest barrier to professional curiosity is their workload pressure, the pressure on their time and their ability to ask those questions, to be curious, to find more out about their clients and service users. The demand now placed on services is in many instances greater than ever before. And that survey tells us that's the single biggest barrier, because people just feel they don't have the time and the actual workload capacity to be curious about their clients. So that perhaps is the number one barrier. But the things that we know from research, and certainly from statutory safeguarding adults reviews, the other key barriers you can see highlighted in red. The first one, the rule of optimism. People not thinking about the worst case scenario. Because we are, as humans, we are optimistic. It's in our human instinct to think the best of people, think the best of the circumstances. But actually, from a safeguarding point of view, and actually from a missing adults point of view, perhaps we need to think about what is the worst case scenario. And often, because we're too optimistic, that becomes a barrier to our professional curiosity. Accumulating risk, seeing the whole picture. Again, we've talked about information sharing, risk assessment, safety planning, who holds information about this person, speaking to the adult themselves. Often we might have one piece of that jigsaw puzzle if we think about it like that, but we don't have the whole picture. We don't have the whole story. So risks accumulate because we're unable to see that whole picture. And again, that is often a big barrier to professional curiosity, that the risks in someone's life are building and building and building, but we've only got a limited view on that risk. Normalization, accepting significant risks in someone's life as normal for them. And again, we've seen this time and time again in Safeguarding Adults reviews, very significant risk in someone's life that they may have had for many, many years. And somehow we've just seen past it and we've seen through it. And we've just come to accept sometimes the very significant risks that are in someone's life. And we've just normalized them. And we've got to really guard against that. And perhaps that also links into the rule of optimism as well. We're too optimistic sometimes about the significant risks that are in someone's life. Professional deference, thinking someone knows best just because of their job title. We have to work together. We have to work across agencies. Yes, we've all got expertise in certain areas and we've got experience, but we shouldn't just defer to someone because we think that they might know best. You might know the adult better than anyone else. You might have worked with that person for many, many years. You might know their circumstances better than anyone else. So you might be best placed to share that knowledge and to help lead on the work around missing adults. So don't think about professional deference and that we have to stand down or stand behind someone else. We shouldn't do that. And that's also linked to professional challenge. Having different perspectives is healthy and should be encouraged. We are allowed to ask questions of each other. And actually, the sign of a good, healthy system is that we do that routinely. So we shouldn't be afraid to challenge each other respectfully in terms of our decision making, etc. And that's something that we need to work upon. And cultural competence, again, is something that we routinely see. London generally, obviously, South London in particular, you know, a very, very diverse area. We all appreciate that. So when we think about cultural competence, it's essential for improving the well-being of adults from the ethnically diverse communities, some of whom are disproportionately underrepresented in accessing protected services. Certainly in Lewisham, I'm guessing it's exactly the same in Bexley and Greenwich too. So we've all got to develop our cultural competence. It's a lifelong journey that we all have because we can't stand still. Things will always change. And if we use the social graces model, which we've got highlighted at the bottom, and if we ask questions about gender, race, age, culture, education, employment, sexual orientation, it will allow us to build up a clearer picture of someone's life, think about cultural competence and the interlinked issues that I've highlighted. So yeah, let's think about professional curiosity and the barriers to that, and think about workload pressure, what managers, senior managers, hierarchies, organizations need to do to respond to the ever increasing pressure that services now find themselves under. But yeah, professional curiosity, a dedicated subject in its own right. We've got a dedicated webpage on that subject in Lewisham and a dedicated training course. I'm guessing there'll be similar resources like that as well in Bexley and Greenwich. So please think about professional curiosity. Interlinked to that is having a trauma-informed approach, which again is a standalone subject in its own right. We should develop our knowledge on this subject. We need to think about taking a trauma-informed approach. What you can see on screen is the government's broad guidance on that subject, the framework that they utilise, those 6 key areas that the government's framework is based upon. And again, you can see the links back to professional curiosity, which I've already mentioned. And again, using the voice of the adult themselves, I thought no one would come, but someone did. They didn't just find me, they saw me. So that's a comment from an adult who returned from a missing episode in South London. That trauma-informed approach that we all need to take. So again, please think about that from a professional development perspective. And again, at the bottom of the screen, we've got some resources signposted there. There'll be many others. So just think about what you can do to improve your practice, improve your knowledge around trauma-informed approach. Okay, so then a summary then of planning and prevention. So we create this little mini infographic. So this is based on the Safeguarding Adults Reviews, so the SARS in Bexley, Greenwich and Lewisham. So Safeguarding Adults Reviews, they are the statutory mechanism that we use in the adult safeguarding system to consider the most high profile, serious cases of abuse and neglect. More often than not, unfortunately, they've led to the deaths of adults, not always exclusively, but more often than not led to the deaths of adults because of some type of abuse or neglect. And what we found in those Safeguarding Adults Reviews, when we think about missing adults, is we see mental ill health and suicidal ideation, post-traumatic stress disorder. We see links to hospital discharge and a lack of follow-up to hospital discharge. We see physical environment and a lack of trauma-aware design, which we've mentioned already. We certainly see mental capacity and the lack of assessment of mental capacity and a lack of engagement with adults in that respect. And the thematic findings highlight recurring missing episodes without escalation. We see that the voices of the adult have not been heard and return interviews had not been conducted. And we see a pattern around military veterans. So I'll come back to that at the very end. But in one of our boroughs, that was certainly a pattern within Safeguarding Adults Reviews. And that was not flagged and it had been overlooked. And more generally, there'd been a lack of risk assessment, which we've talked about this morning. So that safety plan and that prevention focus, considering risks. And again, you can see at the bottom of the infographic there, about, a fifth of missing episodes emanate from care homes or hospitals. So the data is a little bit historical, but it's the most recently available. And again, common factors there were dementia or mental ill health, unescorted leave from some type of placement or inpatient facility. And again, inadequate risk planning and confusion of the person discharged from hospital or a care home. So they're all things that we can see in our statutory reviews across our 3 boroughs, things for us to consider in terms of planning and prevention. So that's the second segment. I'm going to pause there for any comments, anything you think was missing in that segment. Okay, nothing. We filled in some of the gaps as we went along anyway. So thanks to Bernie for the comments around the Herbert protocol, etc. So that helped to fill that out a little bit further. If there's no further comments, then we're going to move on then to the third segment. And what we're going to do now is look at the missing episode itself. And the first thing to describe there is a key practice issue is that there's an expectation that we all take reasonable and practical steps to inquire about the missing adult, to mitigate the concern, and then therefore determine the necessity to report that to the police. So your initial actions to think about, where is the adult? Can we reach them? Can we speak to them? Can we find them very quickly? Can we speak to family members or other service users or the professionals? Can we quickly find them? Can we quickly ascertain what the risks are before we decide there is a necessity to report to police? So that can be done in a few minutes, as I said at the beginning. But what we need to bear in mind is that unnecessary exposure to the police can be detrimental to the person's health, sometimes result in a breakdown of professional relationships. But so we need to bear that in mind. But nonetheless, we need to think about the necessity to report to police and the immediacy of that. And from a safeguarding perspective, our responsibilities from a safeguarding point of view do not end once we've reported someone as missing to the police. So professionals must continue to take parallel action to the missing episode and work with police, stay in touch with police, and support the police in your efforts to find the person, think about the risks, think about who else might have information about that missing person. So that can happen. And certainly if we think about the safeguarding legal duty in our criteria, and if that has also been met and the incident can be reported as a safeguarding concern, that might mean the local authority then will instigate a safeguarding inquiry in parallel to the police's missing person investigation. And often that should happen, and there should be a crossover between the local authority-led safeguarding inquiry and the police's own investigation. If you decide to report a missing adult as a professional, you can do that using 999 if you think the person is at immediate risk of harm or poses a risk to the safety of members of the public. In all other cases, you can use the dedicated portal, and that's signposted here. That's the web link to it. So colleagues who work in social care, care homes, schools, NHS staff, charities, particularly who work with adults at risk. So other key agencies, they can use the partner services portal to report a missing adult. So this is a unique system for professionals that is not used by the wider general public. So again, you can use that web link signposted there on that slide to report someone missing to the police. The information required by the police, you can see on screen there. So details about who you are. So the police can stay in touch with you. A detailed description of the missing person, things that they were wearing, etc. What has already been done to try and find the missing person? When were they last seen? At what time? By whom? Anything that makes them more vulnerable to risks such as sexual exploitation, factors that may have led to their disappearance, details of people they associate with, anything else that you can share that will help the police to find them. Who are they likely to be with and why? And the police will complete a risk assessment based on that information, and that will be a live risk assessment that they will continue to review. And the police will grade their assessment as either low, medium, or high based on that initial risk assessment. And again, the risk to potentially other people as well as themselves. So think about all of that information, and again, the portal and the missing report form will guide you to supply that information. And again, the practice framework, which today's session is based upon, talks about that in more detail as well. So it will guide you to prepare for that and to think about what you need to tell the police and what information you can already have to hand, things that you may already have recorded. There is a link there to the Herbert protocol and how that is submitted to Medical Alert and how the police can use that as well. So the police, once you've submitted a missing report, they will assess every request. They will have not assumed responsibility until they've agreed to accept that request. They've confirmed that with you. So until then, continue to try and find the person, continue with your initial inquiry, think about safeguarding and the safeguarding process, and think about, again, what you can do to support the police once they have taken the lead in terms of their police investigation. That might involve helping to promote and publicise the missing person, but be careful about that. Use the guidance. Again, the Met Police have got guidance on what you can do, what you need to think about. But be careful, because once something's put into the public domain, it's difficult to be able to retrieve that. So if we think about, you know, in the longer term, someone who's missing, is it their autonomy or you know, their right to make that decision? They've chosen to be missing. We've promoted the fact that they've gone missing. Do they want that to be in the public domain? Let's think about that. Let's think about their autonomy, the balance with protection. Think about those things. Use the Met Police's guidance on that before we decide to promote and publicise someone as missing. So, and again, to help support the police, think about those core actions. Contact known locations where the person you know might be found or is likely to be at. So that could be where they live, obviously, health locations, care settings. You can check with the ambulance service, GP, other service providers. Obviously, think about the use of the Herbert protocol, which we mentioned, and medical alert. And think about relational questions, where they felt unsafe, where were they last seen. Think about that relationship perspective. That might help you to support the police and find the missing person. I'm going to show you a very short film on this case. So this is in the public domain. It's relevant to our area. So this is Sean Jones. So this is a local case from our patch from South London. The video was posted last year in August 2025. Sean was missing from June 2017. And it just helps to bring alive the things that we've just spoken about. So I'll show you the short film. Again, just lasts for 3 minutes.
Hi, I'm Susan Mortwood and this is my brother Sean Jones. He's been missing from South East London since 2017. He's not used any of his bank cards or driving licence or sought any medical assistance. When he went missing, he was very, very vulnerable. He's got significant scarring from his shoulder blades down to his bum from being burnt as a child. He's got distinctive tattoos on his hands. He's shortish for a guy, medium build, no hair, as you can see. My brother Sean was a lover of fast cars, the faster the better. He was very loved in the community, happy, bubbly person. He managed to run his businesses despite all his issues. I was very, very proud of the man he'd become. When we were kids and Sean used to go out, I'd always run to the letterbox and shout out Nini, and he would come back and take me out with him. Sean's very, very missed by everyone. Myself, my mum, my sisters, his children, his granddaughter. It's so unlike Sean to disappear for a long period of time. We know that he last had a medical appointment with his mental health facilitator, and they said that they was worried for his safety and that he wasn't himself. We also know that he sold his caravan in May of 2017, and they also said that he was quite poorly when he came to sell his van. It's been such a long time now that he's been missing, but if anybody has any information, no matter how small, please, please, please come forward, even if it has to be anonymously. And a message to you, Sean, I love you so, so much. And I miss you every single day. Please, if you can, just let us know you're okay. Mum's missing you. We're all missing you, and we just love you so much. So please, anyone, again, with any information, no matter how small or insignificant you feel it is, please, please, please come forward. Sean, I love you so much.
Yeah, really powerful film, and obviously signpost to missing people, who are one of the key agencies who work in this sector. So we've certainly been in touch with missing people. Colleagues in the borough will no doubt be working with them as well. So we signpost to them and their services. But yeah, a really poignant film that helps to bring alive the human issue and the lived experience of those who are dealing with missing adults cases. Go back to the slides. And again, you can see on screen there when you access the slides, the link to that film if you'd like to use it as well. Okay, just to add to that then, in terms of the safeguarding response, so we should just follow existing safeguarding procedures. You do not require consent to report someone as missing and for a safeguarding concern to be raised. So again, use the legal duty under the Care Act 2014. We can have a parallel safeguarding inquiry to police investigation to support that. So think about the safeguarding response, and the local authority should have a missing persons plan for each missing adult case where it meets that legal duty and criteria. And again, we can have a safeguarding support plan. And within that, we need to think about support issues. Is there anything else we can do to mitigate risk? Is the person living independently or with another adult at risk? Do they have capacity to make relevant decisions? So thinking about the longer term, if we think about the safeguarding response following a missing incident, what can we do to try and mitigate the risk of future incidents? So again, that is built into our existing safeguarding procedures. Maybe not always used in the way that they might be or could be, but certainly they should be used if we think about missing adults cases. And think about, your connections and links into the relevant safeguarding teams. And that might be the local authority adult social care safeguarding team, but it also might be housing and their safeguarding team, health agencies and their safeguarding leads. So it's not just about the local authority adult safeguarding team. Many agencies, many teams, many departments have specific leads for safeguarding. How can you build your network and connect to those individuals? Think about the safeguarding response alongside the police's missing adults investigations. Again, we've got that in the Herbert protocol video, but the link is also on the slide here to the 3 boroughs local authority adult social care safeguarding points of contact. So that's there if you've not seen them before. Okay, so we're nearly there. So I'm going to pause just briefly now at the end of that last segment, and then we'll go into the final few bits, which just help to recap the rest of the session. Any comments from anyone in terms of things that we've just been through in that last point? Natalie?
Thanks, Martin. Yeah, I guess I just wanted to kind of raise some gaps that we sort of commonly see, which particularly affect our service users. So I'm from CGL, the drug and alcohol service in the borough of Lewisham. So I was just thinking where you'd mentioned around the missing episode, contacting police, and then sort of linking in with other partners. We find that our service users tend to be disproportionately affected. So we will follow up with mental health, which can quite commonly be declined because they are using substances. So it's like, get substances under control before mental health support will step in. Another issue with adult social care is that the thresholds are really high. So again, people will not be supported because they're not meeting the threshold, even though there's like significant risk surrounding people. So that might probably a discussion for another time.
Yeah.
But just something else I wanted to raise as well, when we're thinking about missing people, our women, again, are disproportionately affected, particularly when it comes to domestic abuse. We often get people presenting at the service in extreme crisis, fleeing domestic abuse, literally have just left the situation and have presented at our service. And unfortunately, we'll do everything we can to support, but there is a gap with refugees and that type of support for women as soon as there are substances involved. If they are on scripts, there are gaps there. We've had cases, we get them, very frequently, where women will present in that way. We'll reach out to all avenues that we're able to. The support isn't available for them. The women then go missing. Yeah, so I just kind of wanted to highlight that as sort of a major thing that happens within our service, but not sure kind of how we can bridge those gaps and try and better support people.
Yeah, I mean, that's real world, isn't it, Natalie? All of those things are complex issues, as you said, long-standing and repeated issues. They're barriers for people to access services, might feel that they're pushed to the fringes, and that's, as you've described, a reason why people go missing. We had a similar comment at the very start of the session, and someone was talking about, how they can feel pushed aside because of the link between homelessness and the use of the criminal justice system. So yeah, I think from a planning and a prevention perspective, Natalie, they are things to work on. How can services better integrate themselves and connect together and understand? Because if they don't, it can lead to people going missing and can increase the risk to that individual significantly. So yeah, that coordination, that integration, that connection is really, really crucial, isn't it? So not only from a safeguarding point of view, from a missing adults perspective, but more generally, that we feel our services are as well connected as they possibly can be. So yeah, it's real world. Thank you, Natalie, for sharing your experiences. Yeah, so moving on to the final part of today then. So the post-incident evaluation. So once a person has returned, that chance to be able to talk to the adult, to be curious, to be professionally curious around the factors that have influenced or led the person to go missing in the first place. The police will consider the necessity for a police prevention interview, so a requirement for them to do that. And they will obviously think about risks and patterns of incidents, etc. But it's something that actually all services can think of, and they can all adopt trauma-informed return interviews. So any service can do this. You can offer that return interview to the person sensitively. It doesn't have to happen. It could be a choice. Think about how that's delivered, the pace at which that's done. That will be sensitive to the needs of the adult themselves. Ask the person why they left, not just where they went. Ask them what they were doing when they were missing, who they were with. Were they missing of their own accord? Were they taken? Were they removed? Were they trafficked? We've mentioned that earlier, so it's not just about where people voluntarily go missing. Think about triggers. What triggered them? What was the underpinning reason? Maybe there's a pattern there. Maybe there's a trend. Think about the triggers for people going missing. Were they a victim of a crime whilst they were missing? Do you need to involve the police? Safeguarding concerns more generally. Again, do we have a safeguarding concern or inquiry? Do we need to think about reporting it to the local authority in that respect following a return from a missing incident. And just more generally, think about what we've talked about today: mental health, drug and alcohol use, abuse itself. And that could be in many, many different forms. So physical abuse, emotional abuse, financial abuse, neglect. More generally, the person's risks and concerns in terms of their welfare. And again, in the practice framework, there's an annex set out to almost act like a checklist to help you with return interviews. And again, you'll see on the slide here some guidance on doing that for Met Police and missing people, who obviously, as I've already said, are a key agency who work in this area. So anyone can conduct post-incident return interviews. Think about taking a trauma-informed approach to them. And again, just to help summarize the whole session, this is what we found from the particular safeguarding adults reviews we've had across the 3 boroughs. So with the Lee review, the context there was he walked out of hospital. There was delays in reporting him as missing. Unfortunately, he was found deceased on the street in another borough 3 days later. So there was a delay there. Bernie mentioned that golden hour of someone going missing, particularly from somewhere like a hospital. That didn't happen in the way that it might have. And there was patterns of behaviour with Lee going missing from hospital. So the safeguarding themes: there was failure to escalate, there was weak inquiry processes, there was a lack of coordination, and there should have been a stronger sense of the continue to search and the follow-up. That there were the implications in that case. With Mia was repeatedly absent from hospital. She had periods where she was rough sleeping. She was not always known. She was linked in with numerous services. They didn't always know where she was. In her life, she had coercive control linked to domestic abuse. She had trauma, addiction, attendances at emergency department. And the implications there was an absence of people, again, flagging those trends, those patterns. There was a lack of assertive outreach and attempts to link in with Mia when she was in the community. She was known to be in places routinely in the community. She was known to be in certain locations, but there was a lack of assertive outreach in her case. Amanda was missing from a care home. She was unfortunately found deceased in a derelict garage, so she was a missing person when she was found deceased, unfortunately. And in the care home where she lived, there may have been poor environmental safeguards in terms of the environment she lived. Did she feel safe there? That potentially was an issue. A lack of proactive care and risk identification in her life. And again, the implications, they are linked to the environment, improved signage, the layout of the place where she did live. There was a lack of post-absence review and interviews with Amanda. Tyrone Goodyear, again, Tyrone was missing when, unfortunately, he took his own life. So again, another adult from South London who died whilst missing. He was living at home in an overcrowded home in temporary accommodation. The risks in his life escalated. He had autism. He had deterioration in his mental health. He had neurodiversity that wasn't fully considered in terms of the increased risks in his life, in terms of suicidal ideation linked to neurodiversity. That wasn't considered. And again, a lack of assessment of risk and an understanding of the ways in which the risks in his life were increasing. Miss G and Mr. Q, that was a thematic review, obviously involving more than one adult in Greenwich, multiple missing episodes from shared accommodation, the themes around the inability to track and escalate those concerns at the time, and the implications, the need to improve information sharing, enhanced monitoring, risk assessment. And then the final one there in Bexley, again, another thematic review involving multiple adults who were found deceased after going missing again. So again, in lots of cases where we see this happen, unfortunately, adults found deceased whilst missing. One of those cases was a military veteran. So that links back to the patterns we found and why we've referenced that in the practice framework. So none of the cases had a coordinated safeguarding response. In one of them, there was a history of missing episodes. And again, there was no unified multi-agency approach across the borough. Again, another reason why we've created this practice framework. So there was silo working, lack of information sharing, lack of risk assessment. So again, the evidence tells us we need to have a coordinated approach. That's why we've created the guidance that we're sharing with you today. And we're using this training session to help to launch that. And in the practice framework, we've got this final checklist, which helps to recap the session today. And we can break it down into sort of 3 areas. So before the episode, before the adult actually goes missing, we can think about the police's definition and use that routinely. We can conduct risk assessment and safety planning. We can take a trauma-informed approach, think about neurodiversity, think about PTSD, think about veterans with military service, think about the Herbert Protocol, how we can use it, how we can use identification tools, think about the physical environment and design, what we can do to mitigate the person feeling unsafe, think about the existing pathways we have, how we can escalate, and what training that your teams, your departments might need on this subject. This video will help, but you might need more detailed training. So think about that. And here's a comment from a person with lived experience. I didn't want to die. I just didn't want to be where I was. During the episode, start reasonable inquiries. Don't wait. Keep looking for the adult. Report it to the police. Think about the immediacy of that. Think about the necessity of reporting it to the police. Make sure you share all of the relevant information with the police that will help their investigation. Link in with colleagues in housing, health, family members, who might have a contact, who might have a relationship with the adults. Think about relationship, trauma-informed approach, ask relational questions, and think about the safeguarding response. In many instances, it might meet the legal duty, the safeguarding duties, safeguarding criteria, and we might need to run a safeguarding inquiry in parallel to police investigation. I left because I didn't feel safe in my own home. I didn't know where else to go. And then finally, after the missing episode, trauma-informed return interviews, respect the adult's voice, try to engage them in the more supportive and trauma-informed way, seek feedback from the police, document what you've done, document what others have done, think about mental capacity assessments, refer into specialist support, trauma hubs, veteran services, conduct the have a multi-agency approach to your return interview if needed. Think about how you can share the learning. Think about what that means from a training perspective. Update risk assessment, safety plans, and review your approach to the whole subject. They asked where I went. I wanted them to ask why I left. So that trauma-informed approach. And again, in the practice framework, it will talk about all of those things in more detail and guide you on how you can develop your approach with that in mind. That's the end of the session. So any final comments or questions from anyone, what we've been through in the last hour or so? Rebecca? Microphone on, Rebecca.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you so much for the fantastic session. I also had a thought on the checklist. I'm just thinking about the final stage of the review, once we know that the person has been missing or is likely to go missing, is whether there could be consideration for technologies that may help. So such things as tracking devices, obviously as part of an assessment of capacity and goals. So I just thought that might be something that would help as well. Thanks.
Thanks, Rebecca. Yeah, it is mentioned actually in the practice framework. The use of technology is mentioned in there, and some of the tools that do exist. And Medic Alert, they can support that. They've got services that you can tap into there as well. Some of them are paid for services, but you can certainly tap into them. But yeah, I think more is needed, Rebecca. I think we need to explore the use of technology more, but it's certainly mentioned in the practice framework. So thanks for highlighting that. Bernie?
Yeah, I know that each of your local authorities actually do have a number of tracking devices that can be issued to residents, but obviously that requires a referral into adult social care and a discussion at panel. But again, like you say, signposting family to sort of think about those devices as well. And maybe linking in with the assistive technology team.
Thanks, Bernie.
Another point, sorry, Martin, was we're not always good at what happens after the missing episode. So what information have we found throughout our investigation? We're not always good at sharing that back with professionals to assist your sort of safeguarding plan as well. And likewise, you know, what is it about this person's current circumstances that we need to be mindful of? So just making sure that those conversations are had, some kind of review process is always helpful to us all.
Yeah. Thank you, Bernie. Yeah, definitely. Paula?
Yeah, thank you so much. And definitely such a great session for a very important topic. I was just thinking, I don't know if those formats already exist, but considering how crucial the first hours are when someone goes missing, and because inevitably it will make people like go into like an emergency mode, especially the professionals are working on that. How, if there is something like a checklist that exists, for example, for the minimum standard reasonable inquiries, that are set to be done before sharing the information with the police, if there is something like a minimum checklist for these reasonable inquiries, also how maybe we can record them in a way that it will be easier for the police to maybe risk assess the episode, and also if would be possible to maybe do also like time box checkpoints, like for instance, if we are doing these inquiries but we are not getting any results or any new information, like how do we keep feedback in the police and every other agent that is involved in this episode?
Yeah, certainly in the practice framework it is mentioned, and in the Met Police's guidance that is referenced as well. So there's an element of that in terms of the checklist approach, the immediate actions, but maybe that's, you know, needs some further development. So maybe that's something that your service might consider developing, Paula, particularly. But yeah, it's certainly referenced in the multi-agency practice framework. But as always, I'm sure there's further developments needed, and you know, I would be hopeful that the approach will continue to be taken forward across our area. So yeah, it's certainly food for thought. Thank you. Then I'm going to come back to Bernie for the final comment, and we're gonna close. Bernie?
Yeah, just to add to what you just mentioned, Paula. So obviously there's different methods of reporting a person missing. We do have the partners online platform that you can use. So on there, it's a very friendly online platform. A lot of the boxes have ghost text, so they'll prompt you for that information. But what I like about it is that once that report's been made, you can download a PDF copy, so that can be handed over to the next shift. It can be emailed to a social worker or EDT. And once you get the reference number, you can also go on there to update us with any new information, as opposed to ringing 101 and sitting in a queue. Obviously, if it's an emergency, it's 999 all the time. And then once you have that initial CAD number, you would just quote that CAD number with a further update as well. But once the report has been accepted, we will reach out to whichever professional has reported that person missing and make sure you've got the contact numbers for our local missing hub, just to assist with that information sharing.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to bring the session to an end. So thanks again for everyone for taking the time to be with us this morning. We'll share the video and the practice framework and the PDF of the slides that I've used as well from today. So thank you all again for being with us.